And thank you, Rachel, so much for having us. Thank you, Tanya, everyone at Uffner Liu. This has been really, really wonderful. Because I kind of got to know Nasir a little bit through the Made in Philly show. I think I knew about your work just through my time at PAFA. We were ships in the night, but he's shown some great work. You've shown some great work at galleries in Philadelphia, and I've known you a little bit through that. So coming here, I guess that was December we had the conversation about Philadelphia.
End of December.
Yeah. It was really kind of fascinating to hear more about your experience and kind of the particularities of Philadelphia. And I've known you to be like a really just wonderful and generous and very present member of the Philadelphia art scene, which is amazing, if I may. And it's only an hour and 10 minutes on the train. So if you haven't come to Philadelphia, I don't know if you have an excuse. So anyway, but it is here. It's really nice to be here with you. I didn't realize this was your first solo show outside of Philadelphia. So that's really exciting. And probably your first since you graduated in April or May?
May. The show's opened within a week.
Okay. So you're a little tired, or hopefully you got some rest. But I think what has kind of grabbed me in the work and kept me and keeps me returning to the work is this kind of tension that you have in between the very the specifics of a place, like a city, and the kind of ubiquitousness of a place as well. So I love that the title is Nowhere and Everywhere. And I think also more than that, and hopefully we'll talk about this, or I think we will talk about this, you really move through a city as a skateboarder and as a biker. And I loved thinking about how you traverse a city, thinking about the possibilities of actually riding it, of actually kind of using it besides for this other type of movement. And I feel like you kind of are constantly gathering images and processing images in this very kind of painterly language. It's very, I love seeing your hand, but at the same time, it feels very kind of like the internet. Like, you're gathering images like it's going to be on a scroll, and you're kind of seeing images as you're scrolling through, or as this kind of like accumulation of images. So anyway, I'm excited to talk about all that and more. I think we'll talk for like 30-ish, 40-ish minutes, and then we'll have questions. So yeah, that's the format. So I guess the first question that we were going to touch on was thinking about East Coast Gas, which is this nocturnal scene over here, this really beautiful postcard size work. And it's a little unusual in that it is a nocturnal scene. There's another one here, but you typically are painting or depicting things during daylight. So, and it's definitely one of these scenes where that could be East Coast Gas. I mean, I guess it's on the East Coast, but it could be anywhere on the East Coast. It's, it doesn't have like a real sense of place, but it is a very specific time and place. So where does this image kind of come from, and how does this relate to kind of your overall interests in general?
So a few parts for that. 'Cause part of it, it's also, that's on North Broad Street, actually very close to PAFA, ironically, but
I don't recognize it.
It's probably, around Fairmount or so. But with that said, is my entire childhood, born and raised in Philly, and I moved outside of the city at around 7 or 8 to the suburbs right outside of the city. But I spent my entire childhood riding in and out of the city with my parents, like not being old enough to be left alone. So like dad doing handy jobs or visiting family. So this is a gas station, probably the last 30 years I've spent many a time passing versus even like, so it's been in my life. And with it, even businesses and other things of like, that's an older model gas station. So like, it's probably had a lot of different lives take over it, but it's still there. So there's history within that context. But even relative to when I'm finally sitting with it, it kind of takes a specific moment to catch me and draw me into actually paying attention to it. And even gas stations are something I kind of fixated a little bit on. During my time at PAFA, one of my upperclassmen kind of made a phrase for his own works calling bridges cathedrals for cars, which kind of stuck with me, of thinking about how tied cars are to our everyday life and the importance of how we're kind of regulated by that. Even driving into New York today, of like gas stations outside of central Manhattan, of like anyone with a car in the city, like where can you get gas, and reliance of like where it forces you to behave and be. so tied into our everyday lives, and like how you're adherent to like where your gas station is in a little bit, even in the most rural place. If you have a vehicle, you have to think about those factors and how that plays into shaping community in places. To talk about the night scene a little, being a night a little bit, I'd actually argue that I gave myself a challenge because I actually prefer painting night scenes, but I always felt like they were my strongest images, just because with shadows and light, you can obscure things, you can crop, you can make very strong contrast. That with this body of work, I kind of gave myself the challenge of like, I want to make daytime work that I enjoy as much as the nocturnal works. For like my last bodies of work, I would always say my favorite was the nocturnal. It might have been the one or two nocturnal scenes, but with this body of work, I say that is not the case. So I still enjoy them and having them. I feel like they've grown in a way, but balancing out why I feel like I enjoy those nocturnal moments.
And how do you, like, there's this is sidewalk sale behind us, another gas station. There's a lot of kind of, again, this urban kind of everywhere, nowhere, and urban, suburban sprawl. How do you select, like, what sticks out to you in a scene that makes you want to paint it? Like, what's evocative enough? Like when is this your sketchbook here? Okay. So, and Nasir's always sketching, always kind of collecting images. How do you decide to make something into a painting versus having it kind of remain as a sketch?
So that kind of speaks some into like the timeline of like, I think of the original images or sketches of all this work, I think the oldest dated one is from 2021 versus most of this body was made this year. So like I can sit with something for that long, and some things I might have seen this month, and now I know it needs to be in conversation. That it's kind of been a dialogue between what I'm currently working on, maybe something specific or something, it might be light or how objects sitting or a story that's unfolding there might capture me. And sometimes it's in relation to other things that I'm already looking at. I'm trying to think of, for an example of actually like there's actually a third gas station, but you don't see the pumps and that blue painting right with the end of an era, which that's a gas station in Abington where I currently live. But I've driven past that probably almost regularly for the last 20 years with family or not. And that gas station was probably abandoned like from 2020 to like 2024. And maybe 7 months after I painted it, there was this change of like, it was now bought and renovated and changed after I painted it. So sometimes it's just a timing of dialogue and paying attention and looking.
Do you return to certain scenes?
I definitely do. I will pay it. Sometimes it's because a lot of it is also I have to spend time with these places. So it's like, it's me being present with all of these spaces. So it's an act of slowing down for me as well. And actually there's that snow painting, will the snow ever go away? And there's Trash Day, which is the little green one, which actually, those are actually right side by side, and you would never know. And those are both in Brooklyn, and those are probably the most recent of images within the show. Because I was visiting one of my tattoo artists, just popped up to say hi and hang out with him, get coffee. And like, this is back in January when it was still snow out, and the snow was just lingering. And like, I thought, this last season of snow was just relentless for everyone. So that right there, like those two images are within a probably 10 feet span of each other, but you never really connect those two in that way of like paying attention to multiple objects and the places. And as I'm visiting places, I'll come back and think about it. I'm constantly just looking and analyzing like every one of these objects and places. There's more sketches and more images that haven't happened yet, and it might come up depending on other things I'm working on and seeing how they visually speak to each other.
Okay, so let's talk about that painting because we were going to talk about it, The Cold That Just Won't Go Away. Because I think this is a great example of how you're kind of using these really specific, like you're just using specificity. There's like the snap at the top of the edge of the grocery. There's the van and the truck. You're rendering things with like a really precise attention to detail, but it's very kind of brushy, and the snow is just kind of all just this really wonderful loose brushwork. I think you really have this kind of like Easter egg, for lack of a better term, kind of approach where you're kind of hiding little hints of things in the works. And I think one of these things that you're hiding is kind of references to class, I did not recognize this as Brooklyn. It could be anywhere, but you are like, this is a specific place, a particular moment, a particular season. And you've talked about kind of this like timelessness as a way of bending time.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do you think about, I guess a few questions. One is I'd love to think about like, or talk about how you're cropping these images. Like why separate the trash cans from this scene? Why like the play and scale? But also how you think about time in general. So I don't know where you want to start with those kind of really general questions.
Starting with time.
Yeah.
So I would say like, to jokingly say I don't respect time as because it all blends of like these range from like 7 years of images and sketches that are collecting, that it all kind of can blend together and start to disappear into itself. That there's a humanness and presence that those are what I care more about, of that that you always fulfill these spaces are lived in, and time kind of becomes a moment that if you are in the know, and why you joked about Easter eggs, I like Easter eggs. So certain friends of mine, I'll hide specific references and bits that I like, things that if you know, even location wise, they can tag you in a lot deeper into these works. And that specificity, and even like to a New Yorker, they might actually pay more attention to that, because like something that draws me in, of like the painting I had in the Philly show, one of those ones was another flower shop from New York, which to me, I'm not used to seeing a style of flower shop in that format, which is very everyday as I've driven through different parts of New York, of like, that's a common place of like how a pop-up business of selling flowers on a market and all of that. So it's within the language of New York, but to us, it could be anywhere. To a New Yorker, that's very specific. So those little things and how they tie together. And even something like in the New Frontier for the Glory Days, which is my friend on this little dirt bike here, that Marlboro sign of like branding and signage, very specifically, if you know an ad campaign, you know when that's from. So like for myself, of like, I love Marlboro's branding. I've never smoked a cigarette, but with that, I'm aware that the cowboy branding was away for a long time and they recently brought it back. So that kind of ties into a timestamp of when that's from, even though it could be yesterday, it could be last year. But if you know those little things of how those very specific things, and that actually even goes into a very funny story for myself that I really enjoy, that happened with work that I think it was 2 years ago. I participated in the Eagles Autism Foundation did a charity show, to which it was Eagles themed artworks that were made there. And I was thinking about these spaces that I do and how would I bring that to something like, I'm not very sports centered in any way. So like, how do you tie the Eagles into this world that I'm building? And I thought about billboards, and that made me do my own deep dive into different Eagles campaigns and billboards. And I found this one that was, I'd never really seen much of, like where figures and things pop out of the billboard frame there. And it was this pile up on the Schuylkill Highway, which I kind of stole that and put that on a billboard on Broad Street specifically, and like changed the text to pile up on Broad. And then comes to the show now, and then the person who was organizing the show, little I find out, that was actually his billboard that he designed for the Schuylkill. And I found out there's actually billboard awards, and he like won his first billboard award with that billboard design. But like, that's such a specific specificity that only he or someone who worked on that would be able to tell you that about it, so that, but it still resonates with everyone all the same. So I'm looking for a lot of those things of like, if you know, you got a reward. If not, it's still satisfying in some way, or gives you something.
And okay, so again, I'm thinking just about scale, because billboards are giant. Like I love the postcard size and like very intimate quality of these works. I mean, some of them are larger, but they're still pretty, compact. So what, why, how do you think of scale? And then how did you kind of arrange the flow of these works? Like, I think I love how it's kind of like a Morse code hang. You have like one moment and then another, and then maybe like a longer one and then a shorter one. How did you think about scale and placement here?
So scale comes from like, my practice is definitely built on draftsmanship and drawing first. So like, I'll repeat a process as much as it takes till it feels right. So some works existed at different scales entirely. And if it's not working, I know I'm attracted to something in an image that I'm can abandon it for a time and come back, and maybe scale is playing into it? Or is it in dialogue with other work now that I'm just not restraining myself, that once I start something, it has to be followed through all the way, that I am truly chasing almost an investigation for myself of like why and what's attracting me, and sometimes what do I need from an image there. And I think a very big thing for me, and it comes in even to this hanging now, is like the dialogue between works. And like I also credit that I worked at the Barnes for a time, so I have a love of salon hanging and how works can interact with each other, that I'm also looking at how the works kind of interact and speak. That as I was hanging this show, I'm thinking about the dialogues between pieces that I'm also thinking about when making. So like these two works here, you have this railing going through at night and day. So like that becomes a fun moment of alignment there, of lining them up now, and carries you into the next work as you're moving through these spaces there. And even these three works behind us of like their bottom aligned there, which you don't really see much up there, of thinking like this is now grounded us together. That's a ground level of how you participate with the work now. So these kind of interactions are, I'm thinking as I'm hanging, and also part of how they exist just within my studio space, seeing them live together.
And how do you want people to move through this? Like, is there a particular narrative or like a...
With this body work, I think it's very much like as you relate to it, because there's so variety that everyone has a different entrance points, that a lot of these spaces, you have your own narratives and spaces that you've interacted with a space like that, and almost your own memories that are evoked. So free flowing as things catch you, and like you'll find a little Easter egg almost, and that'll also make you kind of look through everything else and see what else you can find now of actually spending your time with it. That I like little moments that if you spend time with it, you're going to find something else every time. So those kind of, that one thing that catches you is what's going to make you reinvestigate everything else.
Yeah, when I first walked in, I was really attracted to those trash cans. I love the green. It just kind of really popped off the white wall. And, you kind of have this very, like there's a lot of browns and kind of yellow, light, this nice kind of like red, brickish red. But there's a lot of like kind of more, colors from the man-made, let's say. But I really loved how that really bright, almost like a Kelly green with the blue. It's kind of more like earth colors, but then it's trash. And I also I love the size of that painting too. You're doing so much in like just a little square. But one of my favorite motifs of yours, and I think this was our first real conversation about your work, was talking about your white vans, which show up again and again and again in the paintings, as well as white trucks or trucks in general. So how do you talk about the white van? What does that mean to you? And why is it keep coming up for you?
So for me, it's, as in my own analysis, just paying attention of like all different vehicles and spaces, that the white van is one of those vehicles. Like it hasn't changed in forever, but it kind of easily can exist in all of these different communities, regardless of wealth, area. It doesn't look out of place. It'll be outfitted differently. You have differently painted. You have someone doing graffiti on it. You have a brand's business on it. But it doesn't make, no matter what community, it makes sense there. So there's kind of this ambidextrous nature that exists in all these spaces. And I'm curious and also interested just in those interactions of like people and the mundane, and how things start to blend in. And there's also a coded reading to it. You can see three different vans and like how they sit next to each other, and you can understand without speaking to the person, like what type of business is this? What are you doing? What is the condition? Is this an older one? Is it rusted? That's all language that's coded into our spaces. And I think the van is just a good canvas of showing that goes all over. And that's not even American specific of like the van body will change, but you can see that in Europe or other places as well, of like that language of how those are treated. And that carries through to spaces as well. So that easy barrier into that conversation of looking.
Yeah, and I love how, to me, the van is like it's also really timeless. Some of these models, like they look a little bit boxier. They could be from the 90s or earlier, or another time, but at the same time, they don't really reference any particular time or place. And I love the van is like, so, there's, be afraid of a white van, a guy in a van, or like, I'm also thinking about those scenes in like Home Alone, and they're riding around in that van. But at the same time, it's like totally benign. Like you see them anywhere and everywhere.
And like depending what's on it and what it is, that shapes so much of your interaction with that vehicle. But that's all learned and very personal too. And like we've been trained to think scared of the white van, but that's also something we've inherently been learned. So someone who has no reference to that culture, cinema, stories, they're not going to have that.
Right. So how does like something like labor or class come in to the work, or how are you thinking about that when you're composing some of these images? Because I got to read Nasir's thesis, and it's really fascinating because you structure it like a sketchbook, and there's this kind of like collaging of music, of image, of certainly word, and you talk about how your dad is a handyman's handyman, can fix anything, and then you started kind of approaching images as like something of an architect, where you're really kind of thinking about the interplay between specific geometries and buildings, and then kind of growing from there. So I guess I'm thinking about labor and this kind of just class in general. Like, how are you considering that or not?
I think it comes in just relation to myself and family, but also just learned experience that it's relatable and easy to approach and just jump into those conversations. It's also the spaces I'm more interested in, and I feel like they have more cultural dialogue between them, and the variety. And like the labor class across is there's specifics of like region, but those overlaps of like how they're treated, what happens, what do we do in the day to day. That is a pretty confident saying, like a very universal conversation that just gives to an entryway into the work. And also just personal interest of like, that's more interested in some more like, I will never paint a development complex or something like that. It's more mundane and regular, that you personable even, I would say.
Well, I think when we talked before too, we're thinking about like skateboarding culture and kind of like looking at behind the grocery store and like kind of in these strip shopping kind of places, and you're looking for railings and angles. And obviously I'm not a skateboarder. I don't know if anyone can tell that by how I'm talking about this, but like I'm really fascinated by how like that kind of swiftness of moving through space combined with like searching for possibility to have fun. Like you're looking for potential in the space beyond kind of like a loading dock or like a cement set of stairs. Like I think that kind of like, it's almost like, I don't want to say magical, but there's something like really beautiful in looking for that kind of potential in something that is just kind of really banal and utilitarian. I mean, how do you think that's kind of shaped how you make these paintings? Or do you think that it's like magical in a way?
Oh, it is 100% magic. Skateboarding is.
And do you still skateboard?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm currently hurt right now. So.
Oh no.
I thought I'd be skating more, but not at the moment. But at this point right now, I think I've been skating for 22 years. And that is everything to how I look at the world, how I analyze. Like my childhood was me and my childhood best friend, no money in our pocket, no water, going miles on a skateboard and looking at and going any which direction we would end up until we felt like we needed to turn around. And skateboarding has its own, there's no rules, but it has its own mechanics of rewarding you for being investigative, curious, and looking, of like finding new ways to interact with something. And it kind of rewards you in that sense of like paying attention that nothing is as simple as it seems, and how can you manipulate this to be skatable. And like those years of looking at the world through those lens of like, I move down any block, is like, is there something I can skate on this block here or there? Kind of transitioned in as I built this dialogue around painting of like the same way I would look in that sense is very quick of like, you can miss something in a moment if you're not constantly just active and slowing yourself down. So those two have kind of worked hand in hand of just analysis and looking always.
And then certainly like I again thinking about this kind of how you're ordering compositions, that feels to me like very germane or related to how we kind of see images through a scroll and through a screen. Like I'm thinking about paintings like Day to Day, which is back here on this wall. And this feels like such an anomaly to me, in that it is this kind of like trompe l'oeil, scene of what looks like stuff from your pocket, maybe?
Quite literally, I think I have most of it. It's on me, I think.
Okay, like right now?
I think currently.
Okay, well, you had the Red Bull earlier.
So there is a Red Bull.
Okay. It's
wallet,
right there. Oh.
AirPods.
Okay.
The card is in my phone case. Those
that...
headphones are dead, actually, but
okay.
I have them still.
So, I mean, it feels like the flatness there and kind of just like this everything all at once, and kind of, again, how images are rubbing up against each other to kind of articulate an experience that is really specific to you, but this could be kind of a lot of people's pockets. Not mine. I don't drink Red Bull, but if it was coffee, it could be quite similar to mine. So, like, talked about this image? Why is it so different than the rest here? And what was like very provocative or meaningful to you in painting this?
So for me, it is my everyday, which kind of plays into like painting is also my everyday of the language there. So talking about the objects in itself of like, these are my person, which kind of evolves into like this analysis, the things that are on my person as I'm moving throughout these spaces. You have my sketchbook, all the objects that are important to me in my day-to-day. You have my phone on there, which is even going into the image catalog that's on my phone, because I feel like my phone and sketchbook are both part of the same archive of images that I'm pulling from both of those when I'm thinking about making. So there's that layer of that. And then I also really enjoy still life and images. So even thinking about like the flatness that comes about in my other works of like that language of like how they overlap there. And then you have the window motif, which I kind of play with in some works of like looking into windows and other stories unfold, which that image on there is when we talk about scale and other things that I make, that window has existed in maybe 4 or so paintings that I've been tried to work through at much larger scales, smaller scales, and none of them have sat right until I kind of layered it like that, which kind of plays into like the layering in my sketchbook as I overlap images and I'm thinking and just like slapping things down as they all communicate and speak to each other. That it kind of played with that of like, we go through my day-to-day and this making of that kind of references how all of these paintings also come about of like laboring over repetitive, going through, if this doesn't work, it's going to change. So like even this 2 panels right here was originally a larger painting that was twice the size. So it was 2 panels, but imagine it was just twice the size in there. And something as simple as scale change and like being willing to play versus I was very much committed and very far along in the larger painting to just abandon it and go, all right, I just have to do this now. And so that flexibility of like, all right, this is play, we're going to do this until it feels right.
Kind of like skateboarding.
Yeah. And skateboarding is also one of those things like bringing that back into is like, I've learned how to fall. I've fell 1,000,000+ times. But what skateboarding does, a lot of other activities doesn't teach you is like you learn more from failing and getting up and trying again and adjusting. So like that into my nature of painting of like, I will experiment and keep going because as long as I don't stop, every failure is moving forward.
I always think that's like the really wonderful thing that art school teaches you. Having not gone to art school myself, but kind of been around them, is like, I feel like if you're in maybe it's in all arts, but at least in my experience in a fine art setting, like you have to really learn how to fail in public. Like you might have a critique that is awful and you have to kind of defend it. And I think that's like a really, it's hard to learn how to fail in public like that and to keep going. Not everyone has that kind of stamina. So I'm glad you kept going.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make sure we talked about Philadelphia a little bit because I'm really relatively new to Philadelphia. I've been there for 3 years. I think I'd spent like a total of 5 nights there before I moved there. But I've really fallen in love with the whole city. It's an amazing arts town. It's a great city, I think, for artists because it is pretty affordable still. There are great spaces and particularly great artist-run spaces, some of which you've had chosen. But how do you, like, you're really like, were you born in Philadelphia? Yeah. Okay. So you're born in Philadelphia and pretty much raised in Philadelphia. Yeah. So how does that kind of like, what keeps you there? And like, why is that generative for you as an artist to be in that place?
Born and raised, I've kind of joked it like, I feel like I have to leave the country to leave Philadelphia at the end of the day for actually living wise. but I feel it's so tied into my roots, like heritage of growing up.
Mm-hmm.
It's also historic in terms of like it has new, it has the old, the history is there,
Mm-hmm.
structures. Like I've always loved architecture and building, so like it has those things that are playful, experimental. The arts community itself and like just the general culture around Philadelphia is something I've always drawn. This Philadelphia skateboarding is also tied into like my history, which has its own cultural cachet that we could talk about for hours.
I
And
know.
stuff for what's going on
dipped my
within
big
that.
toe in some of that history since we talked. There's a lot there. Yeah.
So like all of that kind of ties me to so much story and family and friends, and I feel like it's a great point of reference for me. Like even as I expand, everything is referential to like how it compares or contrasts to Philly, and that feels like a fun place for me as I enjoy it, and also just being able to move around the city the way you do and the people and the culture there.
Mm-hmm.
It's its own very special place that I wouldn't be me without, and I'm very aware of that.
So you're going to stay in Philadelphia?
Yeah, couldn't go anywhere.
And do you think it's a good arts town? Do you think it's good for artists?
I think it's great there. There's so much experimentation, so much things going on, freedom to play, and then it's close to everywhere you really want to be or do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, we're not going to talk more about skateboarding because I would embarrass myself. What are you working on now that you've opened your thesis and the show? Are you going to like chill out for a little bit, or?
I don't know what that word means.
Yeah, I know.
The day after this the day after the show opened, I started my next painting.
Okay.
So I have a handful of paintings I've already started since. Right now, because I'm done school, not working for the first time in ages, I'm kind of like free flowing through the studio. I'm like taking breaks through work, just working and pacing myself in that regards, but it's just full steam ahead.
Mm-hmm. And you got a traveling fellowship that enabled you to go around the country and gather images. Are you going to do more traveling this summer for that?
Minorly. So the Elizabeth Greenshield Foundation, I received my second grant from them in the beginning of this year. The first one I'd used, which kind of inspired a lot of this kind of conversation there, is I traveled a lot around the country, exploring and getting research and building my catalog of images in reference to Philly elsewhere. This time I pitched to them basically like, I'm going to finish school. I had one before. I've spent this 2 years in the studio. I have these 2 shows that are open up, and I kind of just want to have time to just be in the studio after school and just jump into a body of work while I'm still in the momentum of everything I'm thinking about and doing. So I feel like that's just kind of how I'm treating the summer, this sweet spot, just being able to work, and like that's the only thing I have to actually think about or required of me.
That's beautiful. That's awesome. Thank you so much. Are there questions from y'all folks? Yes.
So what I really love about your painting is these really broad horizontal stripes and walks of color. And I feel like your palette is very bright and primary. I'm curious if you're true to life when choosing your colors or even your compositions.
So very much, because I wrote about it some in my thesis too, that like I'd actually argue that compared to like looking at the landscape around us, you've never, and most likely never questioned if a color looks right next to it, that like looking for those weird moments in color, that they exist in these spaces, even if it's a weird colored car, that looks out of place, is all naturally fitting together. So I'm trying to, as honestly as true, stick to those palettes. Sometimes I might pump it up a tiny bit of like, just to make a stronger image, because I am an image maker at the end of the day, but I am sticking to those palettes. Yeah.
I like what you said about every failure moves you forward. There's a saying for that. It's called fail better. I don't know if you ever heard that before.
I've not, but I like it.
It's a wonderful saying. And my question is about this painting. It's very brave to abandon something. So what's the difference? This is just, kind of an odd question, but what's the difference between what you finally decide on and what you discarded?
So with that, is part of it is just because this abstraction that happens in the window there is very a newer thing for me, because I love clutter and filling spaces. Like I will paint you every single brick if I have the time and the choice.
You did over there.
Exactly. So with that, it was I think at the scale that it was at, the abstraction just kind of was losing itself. So I was like aware of like what was not working, but I enjoyed the moments there. But it was like at that scale, it just was losing itself to the importance that is like, if I size this down, it was also a gamble because I didn't know it was going to work at this scale. And I did go all the way through, because that original painting was also something, because when I say abandon things, it also might be just me leaving it alone for 7 months, to which that painting I was on and off for a year and a half at the larger scale, and it just never realized itself, versus some paintings I might just run through it all the way in one shot. And once I kind of got down, it's like, all right, that feels how I want it to feel in that way.
Bravo for being that brave.
It's terrifying, but it was also like, but it's the nature, because the nature of myself too is because I'm working on multiple things at one time. It's not like all my eggs are in that one basket. So if that's frustrating me, I've got 3 other paintings that I can kind of bounce between as the day goes, and like you'll get left alone until it feels right to touch you.
And only you will know. That's good.
What is this one called?
Home Team. So that one also originally was going to have 2 figures in it, and like even the changes of it. And I think the original one had the shape of the 2 figures, so it was going to be me and my dad, because that's my brother-in-law's old pickup truck.
Oh wow. Yeah, I love the doubles in this. There's like the splitting of the truck, there's the 2 doors, the 2 posted signs, and then these 2 sets of windows where the reflections are just like so rich. I mean, they're, yeah, just some of these gestures are just like wild. And then you have like the teeny tiny image on the side there. Everyone should look at this close up.
So there's actually a fun story with that little window, because as part of University of Delaware is you're teaching undergraduate classes while you're part of the program. So I was teaching undergraduate painting, and I would work on my own paintings in the class, because I liked that my students were able to see what I was actively doing as a working artist while they're also working on their undergrad stuff. And actually, that's one of my old paintings, actually from my ASE at PAFA. And I actually asked one of my students, go through my website and pick a painting, and like I'm gonna just make a little poster of it that I like hide in there that you can find in there. And like she posted picks one of the paintings that I have so many mixed feelings about, because for a long time I couldn't stand that painting, but everyone enjoyed it except me. So it kind of like forced me to even come to terms with that. So it even becomes another layer.
And why didn't you enjoy it?
I think for that ASE showing, it was
which is the annual student exhibition.
Yeah.
It's like the thesis.
I think for that one, it was like a quicker painting I did, and like it worked as an image, but I feel like there were so many more technically well done paintings that were in that show, but that was the one people kept talking about. So it became like, I've got all this other work, and even for the like maybe the next year following, people would ask about that painting in particular, when I was like, I'm already making better work. Why do we keep dragging this one back up? Which I was like, I did something that people enjoyed. I shouldn't feel any kind of way about it, but it was kind of like competing against myself.
I never asked you, and then there's 3 in the show that are diptychs kind of pushed together, I believe. 2. Is that one?
There's 3. Oh yeah, there's 3.
Yeah,
1, 2, and 3.
Because I didn't actually notice that was the pushed together panel, so it's right next to it. But I'm curious about that, like how you make that decision.
Because a lot of these images, I feel like, because they're almost part of capturing a moment that they can keep going. So part of it is that I like that this tacked on panel that one of my faculty at PAFA, Peter Van Dyke, had these more elaborate kind of paintings where he might tack another painting on top, and it wasn't as clearly a rectangle. And I like that the expansion of the world and this more controlled, like in a lot of these spaces, if you can almost now imagine that if you tacked another panel on the side, these images can keep going. And it also plays with the illusion of length and shape there, and how you can split, and also just composing these images. It gives a different level of play.
And we didn't talk about people in the paintings as much, but you really like, there's such a presence and absence of people. I mean, there's one person, your friend, in the Murbo painting, and there's again like all these kind of like hints at lived in space, but there's not a whole lot of figuration at all, or figures rather.
Because it was one of the things, like I actually genuinely enjoy painting figures and portraiture, but then there's also like there's a conversation of human presence that sometimes they're just not needed and can be a distraction. And I also often like buildings and places as these characters, and even when I do have figures, I almost always view them as a prop to the scene versus them being focal. So they're kind of like that figure in the bike, or even the little figures are in my brain are no different than a traffic cone being placed there, and it's kind of filling a role of specifically like if you see a traffic cone, you're going to say it's a spill, it's an accident, and that's similar kind of focus when there's a figure is like it's filling some specific role.
I mean, I'm also appreciating so much more and sitting in the spaces, like all the shadows that are really evocative of people and kind of a movement, like shadows of cars, shadows of your friend, shadows, and there's this gleam next to the yellow houses there, yellow buildings. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit more about your relationship to photography? You say you also use your iPhone.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, this one here very much looks like a lens wide angle.
Mm-hmm.
But it also sounds like you're not replicating photographs.
No. So I had a wonderful faculty member who's like an extra mother to me, Maria Teicher, who taught at PAFA, who taught reference photography for artist class, which I kind of is where my cataloging system comes from. And like a lot of her mindset is like, for as any artist, whether you're an abstract artist or a representation artist, if you have this visual library of images and things to pull from, you'll never run out of inspiration. So constantly building on that. So that kind of became the base of like constantly documenting whether I'm ready to use it or thinking about it now. That even with something like this, as I'm working, even if I have one image, I'm going back and finding more images as I'm working on it. Like I'm looking intentionally to add other things, or I might go back and see if something's changed, what's different, or like what I can add to a space. And then I'm also free to manipulate, like this one here, that was my brother-in-law's pickup truck, but that actual location is Frederick, Maryland, where his truck's never been. So like things like that, if I'm adding objects of like, there's no adherent, as long as it blends in, there's no adherence to needing to stick to that image, but being able to build from that catalog of things I have to pull from at all times.
Thank you so much, Nasir.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you all for being here. And the show is up till July 2nd.
Yeah.
So amazing.